Hey guys, today's story is a rather long one, but a rather tame one, about a guy named Taylor. First of all, apologies for not formatting this all nice and pretty, as I'm on mobile. Secondly, sorry for keeping out a lot of the cooler in-game story details. I would have liked to have kept them in, but it would have been just too long to write it out. Thirdly, the order of operations in this story is mostly correct on a broad scale, but my memory in relation to time is very poor, so some of the events detailed here may be slightly out of order. Nevertheless, here's the story of how I had to kick someone from my game. A couple of years ago, I got in touch with a group of players that needed a DM for their 5e game, since their DM had ghosted them and none of them were confident in running the game. My current group wasn't going to have much time to play soon, and I love playing with new players, so I happily joined their Discord server, and we began to plan out the beginnings of an adventure together. I was told, going into this, that everyone was completely new, and wanted to get a taste of what playing with an experienced DM was like. Some of these players knew each other previous to making this group, and others not so. I was happy and excited about all of this, as this was exactly what I had signed up for. What I wasn't prepared for was the star of the story, and the person I'll be referring to as Taylor. Taylor was initially very friendly, if a little overbearing to talk to, but they quickly came out to say that they had been not only playing, but also running D&D games for many years, spanning what would now be a decade of experience. They initially joined the group as a potential DM, saw that someone else had taken up the role, asked to be a player, and then didn't step up to run the game once the other DM vanished, simply waiting for someone else to fill in. That seemed a bit odd to me, and they occasionally made inappropriate jokes, and seemingly had very poor communication skills, despite being the oldest person in the group, the youngest being 16 or so. Taylor being in their mid-20s. But they were eager to make a character that fit well with my setting, and I was caught off guard by how relieved I was to have a player with experience at that game. In the coming weeks, I spent a lot of time working with everyone to make characters that they were happy with, each with their own level of personal investment that they were content with. Taylor took this process way too far. Almost like I was supposed to make their character for them, constantly asking to be on a Discord call, to ask me hundreds of questions about my setting, and derailing away from the topic of their character for hours on end, never giving me a straight declaration of what characteristics or history their character had. And even so, much as changing their character's mechanical background multiple times even after the campaign had started, opting to give me multiple options that they'd ask me to choose from. This process was tiring and exhausting for me, and extended past the beginning of the campaign so they could shape their character after we had started. But once we had come to a conclusion about a piece of their character, they were great at sticking to it and role-playing it out, giving everyone else their own space to roleplay, and interacting well with the setting and meta plots. After a year or so, the campaign came to a conclusion, with Taylor's character's ex-mentor being the party antagonist and final boss. It was a great send-off and emotional time for everyone at the table. And I told everyone that we'd be taking a break over the summer so I could take a break from long-form DMing and prepare for the next campaign, which I informed everyone was to be a nautical adventure, being excited for the new Ghosts of Saltmarsh book being released in the coming weeks. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and Saltmarsh has been released. I'm listening to the AC Black Flag OST on loop, and I'm working with everyone to make new characters for the new campaign. Everyone has wonderful ideas for great characters that fit well with the theme of an adventure on the high seas, along with my background themes of personal identity. Things that I was personally struggling with and was excited about exploring. Taylor, on the other hand, was once again difficult to create a character with, but for different reasons. This time around, they'd come to me with a class and race instead of a character, and held certain expectations for me to allow anything regardless of setting, tone, and themes. I reiterated many times that I was specifically looking for a character, not a build, and that I felt that they were looking at my campaign in a little bit too munchkin-y or min-maxing kind of way, which I didn't really appreciate. Taylor took a huge offense to this, saying that they played D&D for story development and that it was a cool game, so I took back my statement and apologized. Many hours of back and forth and a handful of character concepts, i.e. race and class that would be making use of a particular feat that made little sense in setting, despite being given a plethora of source material and tastes for what I was looking for. Later, we settled on a character they were invested in, and I was content with. They told me all about her personality and history of the past few months, and that she had no memory prior to 1 year ago, and that I had free rein to decide whatever I please about her past. I took it up as a personal challenge, and essentially wrote in their character's history where she was from and how she wound up where she was, slowly dropping hints and clues until they got their first real character arc that delivered clues about her past. It was a lot of work, but everyone at the table was enjoying the mystery, and I was proud of myself for crafting a lot of this character. Things had been going well in-game, but unfortunately Taylor had started to flake out week after week for about 5 weeks straight. They'd either have to bail last minute or leave earlier than halfway through the session every time. Taylor would have genuine reasons to leave and apologize profusely, saying that it wasn't fair to me and they'd make it up to me. I never gave him a hard time for it, even if it did bother me, since I'm always making a point to be punctual and we played at the exact same time every week. This was around the same time they had started seeing someone romantically, and their overall activity in the group chat had basically become non-existent outside of scheduling for D&D night, while the rest of us had become close friends, chatting every day. After 5 weeks of this, some of the other players were getting agitated with this, and I could tell. I decided I'd give them one last chance, and if they couldn't stay for the whole session, they were officially out. But Taylor showed up early, as they did usually, before the flakiness began, and I was seeing a ray of hope shine in. That ray of hope was stuffed into a black hole of despair when I realized that they were intoxicated. It felt like I was being stabbed in the back, and let me explain why. I've had some poor experiences with drunk people in the past, and so I personally don't drink or do any kind of drugs myself. I've had exactly 1 shot of alcohol in my life after giving in to some peer pressure. However, I don't mind if other people drink, even to excess, as I'll happily let them be and simply separate myself from them for the time being. That's fine with me. I had never explained this to the gaming group, but I made it clear in the session 0 of both campaigns, of which Taylor was present for both of, that I ask everyone to come to the table with a clean system, making exceptions for things like medications, obviously. I had no idea what to do when Taylor decided that they'd get drunk with their partner before the game, and hadn't considered the ramifications that they wouldn't have worn it off in less than 2 hours. They weren't blackout drunk, and although they were clearly affected by it, and I was very uncomfortable, I decided to extend this one last chance and let them play out the session. It was one of the most intense and exciting sessions I've ever ran. However, nearing the end, the party was making a break for the exit of the ship, being currently attacked by a gargantuan octopus, when Taylor's character noticed a druidic shaman summoning a zombie beholder. Instead of continuing into the upper deck and making further escape, Taylor decided to charge at it, rolling initiative in an attempt to take it down. They had the diamonds they were after, they were low on resources, and the ship they were on was under attack and sinking. They were level 5, a zombie beholder. They were not supposed to fight it after going through multiple combat encounters. After some fortunate and unfortunate rolls, Taylor's character was disintegrated. Gone. They killed it, and made a break for the exit. I was now deep in pure, full-on panic. I just killed someone's character for a decision they had made while they were intoxicated. The session ended. Taylor and I were both grieving, as their character was really a culmination of both our efforts. I had almost forgotten entirely about their flakiness and pre-game drinking, and we were talking about their next character the session after we had sent a send-off for their previous one. It was a tasteful, respectful send-off and a powerful yet somber moment that really cemented the party's link to each other that will keep them united for the rest of the campaign. Their ship's name is now named after her honor. Then we began the character creation process again, and I remembered how stressful this was. On top of the grief from losing this character, this time was the hardest. I felt terrible, as this was the first time I had killed a character, with no chance of resurrection no less, and wanted to accommodate Taylor as much as possible while still keeping to the themes of the campaign. It was infuriating. Taylor wanted to be a full caster and still be viable in combat, i.e. have multi-attack and a hit die of D8 or better, aka a true Gish build. I told them that while that was fine, I once again needed a character to work from so I could incorporate them into the story. Not only did they not give me anything to work with, they also didn't want to be a war cleric. The closest thing 5e has to a full caster with multiple attacks and a decent hit die, because it was objectively bad. I thought about my previous comments to them about power gaming, but refrained from bringing it up again, letting them know that any of the 5e official books were fair game. This wasn't enough for Taylor. They went off on their own and started making a homebrew cleric subclass that had the flavor of the war domain, but was mechanically up to par, that they informed me that they would use after I had been given a chance to look it over. I'll admit, I snapped at Taylor for this. We had gone through so much already, and I asked them to simply make a character and use any of the 5e books to fill in their mechanics. I could tell I went a little bit overboard because they were noticeably put off and seemed a bit defeated by this. We ended up with them playing a ranger using the new class feature variants UA, since they were
finally a viable option to play now,
in Taylor's words. The first session that their character showed up in, they had to flake out halfway through. The session after that, they couldn't make it. I was done, drained, frustrated, still grieving over our lost character. I was on the verge of telling Taylor that they weren't to come to my games anymore, when they informed me that the timing of their new job wouldn't mesh well with the time we were playing at, and that they'd be stepping away from the game for the time being. I was in pure relief. After everything, I was free. I could finally play with only 4 players, my preferred party size, and I realized how much less stress I was undertaking with my prep work for the next session because I didn't want to have to worry about Taylor. I never realized how much pressure their presence added to my games, and I was relieved to have them say goodbye. They were still in the group chat, and were still going to participate in the other campaign being run by another player, which I am so proud of him for doing. But I was fine with that, as I really didn't have a personal problem with Taylor now that they're not involved with my game. 2 weeks later, I'm about to start the weekly session when Taylor pokes their head into the voice chat before we start. I asked them if they needed something, and they mentioned that they're just going to listen in this week. But if we're going to be starting earlier regularly, which we weren't, it was a one-time thing, that they'd be able to play. After the session ended, I informed them that even though there were no hard feelings, I wasn't ready to welcome them back to my game after the things that they had done. It wasn't fair to the other players, and it would be stressful on me to ping-pong Taylor in and out of the story, even though they promised they'd be more reliable in the future. They said that they understood, and that I was still welcome in their upcoming campaign that I would be a player in. That campaign was cancelled within days. I'll post further about Taylor if anyone's interested, about how they behaved in the campaign ran by the other player and my own experience when they ran an adventure themselves. but I really needed to get this out into the world so I could stop thinking about it. I'm mostly over it now, but it's still hard to think about. I hope someone reading this can take away something from it, but I wish I had sooner. Well guys, what can I really say? Beyond the fact that Taylor was either unwilling, too scared, or too lazy to make his own character, and making the GM do it, and getting a bit flaky near the end and showing up once drunk, all honesty, I'd say that the story was not particularly egregious, and the DM and Taylor even agreed in the end with no hard feelings. Of many of the RPG horror stories I've read, this is certainly one of the more tame ones. However, the fact that the OP mentioned how they'll talk on how Taylor acted in the other games, and as a GM, makes me concerned if this was just a slow decline for this guy. But in any case, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have a story that you'd like me to narrate, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.